Welcome back to The Amateur Historian and to Filling in the History. Today is a very special episode. I hope that you enjoy this. This is a bit of a challenge, in my opinion, but we are going to be talking about probably one of the most important revelations, as we would call it, which is Section 76. This is what's called the Vision. And this, I would argue, is probably one of the greatest, most, thought about. It's affected how we construct temples. It's affected how we view life and death and where we came from and why we're here and where we're going. This is what we a lot of times call the plan of salvation. So this is a pretty exciting day. I'm also hoping that I don't hurt myself doing this. But again, just so that you know, Filling in the History is a Joseph Smith Papers storytelling about the history. We're going to be only constraining what we have to what is provided in the Joseph Smith Papers. I'm going to be doing a special thing just to explain in sort of modern terms what this is, just so that you know, and so that we're crystal clear. But there's going to be three parts today. We're going to be talking about a letter from Oliver Cowdery, which sort of talks about a general conference that happened in Zion. We're going to be talking about the vision, and then right below the vision, there's actually going to be a revelation that was crossed out, never published, and we're going to talk about that as well. The before and afters of this is going to be pretty brief, but I'm hoping that you enjoy this. This is a very critical theological, document that is extraordinarily precious to Latter-day Saint culture. So I hope I do justice to this. But to get into it, and let's get into it, we're going to be talking briefly about a letter from Oliver Cowdery. So this is not a revelation. Oliver Cowdery wrote this letter to Joseph Smith, but it was actually sent to Newell K. Whitney, who was one of the church bishops at the time. You have Edward Partridge and you have Newell K. Whitney. So Cowdery was sent to Missouri, where they held several conferences in Newell Knight's place in what's called Caw Township in Missouri. And I don't believe that's what it's called anymore. I can't find it on a map, but that was sort of in this Zion Independence area. The original of this is actually stored in the Church History Library. And since it's a letter, it's not like it was published or a lot of other things, and mostly it's minutes of a meeting, quite frankly. And so the circumstances of this letter and why you have it, there was a conference held in Independence. Oliver Cowdery actually kept the minutes of the meeting. So this particular document is written in Oliver Cowdery's hand. And the church is really trying to grow in Missouri. And one of the reasons why I like this letter, and I wanted to kind of start with this, is to show the contrast and sort of how the theology of Latter-day Saint religion works. So in this case, you have a conference. It is all about purchasing lands. Edward Partridge is going to run the store that helps to raise funds to help all of this sort of function. They had a plan for building schools and the need for pulling in skilled labor from other places to be blacksmiths and wheelwrights and cabinet makers and carpenters and joiners and all those kinds of things, to build just the things to make this area into a legitimate city. And there's also some kind of general correspondence that is coming from Edward and Oliver to Joseph in this letter, and we'll get to that in a second. So again, I really don't want to bore you with a lot of this because a lot of it's numbers and accounting and all this kind of stuff, but there was a couple of resolutions that were done here that I thought were really interesting, and I feel, even though I don't think it's solely the thing, I think that a few of these cultural things we still do today for sure. So, for example, there was a resolution that all priesthood offices should be included in common consent. So whether you're a deacon, a teacher, or a priest, that you should be presented before a congregation and that they should sustain you. We do that with all callings now. So I would say that the genesis of this tradition and of this custom that we have may have started with this general conference. And it was funny because somebody just stood up and said, look, I think we all need to be treated the same way. They agreed, and they said, okay, from now on, anybody who has anything to do with priesthood or callings in the church needs to be sustained in common consent. And then they resolved to request shoemakers, carpenters, joiners, masons, tanners, hatters, cabinet makers, a silversmith, and a wheelwright to pull into Zion. And then they actually gave an accounting of the money they've spent, where it went. Those things are written out, and they were approved by the conference. So there's some accounting and some sort of balance sheet things that they were doing, which I think is really interesting for a small church to be that strict with themselves and say, no, we got to do this right. So I thought that was really interesting. They talked about practical things. They talked about clearing land. They talked about purchasing land. They talked about getting buildings built, managing property. And then at the end of the letter, sort of at the end of the conference portion of the letter, a lot of it is talking about, how's everybody doing? We're in generally good health, this, that, and the other thing. There was a final statement here that I wanted to read out that I thought was interesting, and it says, P.S., which is postscript, by the way, for those of you who may not know, silly thing, but postscript. We expect soon to be ready to print and hope that Brother Martin Harris can supply with paper at present. You can tear off the bottom of this sheet, which will serve him for a bill. You see, if 10,000 copies are struck, it will make double the amount of the first mentioned reams, and we feel anxious that it may be so, for I think there is no fear of sale. O.C., which means Oliver Cowdery. So what does this mean? There was a sort of an order made to get paper to print. And if you don't know, a ream of paper is basically just like a stack of precisely cut papers. And so basically what they said is, here's the receipt at the bottom, just tear that off when you're ready, and he can keep that. So that portion of this document is no longer extant, but that was what was included on here. So what I find interesting about that is it's a lot the same as how we do business today, of like, hey, here's my order. Maybe we do it through the internet now, but here's my order. It might come with everything else, but this is what we need. And this is the beginnings of the printing of the Book of Commandments, which, as you know, most of this paper that they procured was destroyed when the townspeople attacked the press and destroyed the press, scattered everything into the wind, and just a few of those broadsheets and printed pages were saved and later printed into Books of Commandments. That later became the Doctrine and Covenants. So we're starting in on the printing of it, and they don't know how yet it ends. And it's always like hard to read the history because you kind of know how it ends. So that's the end of that. Very practical. Not a whole lot to it. We're going to go from there into what we call into what we call the plan of salvation, this vast, overarching, cosmic idea. But I just find it very interesting that in contrast to that, right before this, you have, how do we plow land? How do we clear trees? How do we build buildings? And then we're getting into this. So I'm going to stop that as our first part of this. And as you go into part 2, I'm just going to have an entire part just for section 76, or what we call the vision. Stick around.